Welcome everyone to our November Coffee Chat. I'm Laura Knutson-Murray. I'm the GIS Coordinator and Community Outreach Assistant with IrisBG. With us today is Jana Jones, our Social Media and Community Outreach Assistant, Mari Rusten, Director of Strategy and Product Manager, and Oyvind Rusten, the founder and CEO of IrisBG. The recording, presentation, and other material will be made available in our Knowledge Library. All of our previous coffee chats can be found there under the category Articles and Presentations. You can also follow the topic IrisBG Coffee Chats and be notified by email every time something new is published. The idea for this session is that we at IrisBG would offer you a space where you can connect with your peers and have a chat about IrisBG or the issues that may arise with your work, with your collection. We don't have a fixed format for these, so please get in touch with me if you would like to present anything or challenge the community. It can be anything big or small. Hopefully today you will make some new connections and together we might become a little bit wiser. Please take a minute to answer our usual question. Rate your experience using IrisBG. Are you trying out the trial, a novice, an intermediate, or an advanced user? Looks like we have 54% advanced, 8% intermediate, and 15% novice, and 23% trying out the trial. Great context, thank you. And here's just an overview of the institutions represented here today. It's great to see so many here from our community. And our agenda today, Mich is the program officer for the IUCN Species Survival Commission for Cactus and Succulent Plants Special Group, hosted by the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix, Arizona. He's also a doctoral candidate for the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Arizona in Tucson. He is a member of the IUCN Succulent Plant Illegal Trade Task Force and a member of the Cactus and Succulent Society for America Conservation Committee. He also is a part of the Tucson Cactus and Succulent Conservation Society. He's dedicated to cactus conservation. He studies the impact of climate change on cacti, and he became interested in cacti as a teenager growing up in Belgium, where he started a small cactus collection. When Mich moved to Tucson in 2016, things quickly got out of hand. And in 2021, he opened a conservation-focused cactus nursery called Prickly Prospect, where he focuses on ethical propagation of the most endangered species. He's involved in conservation projects with several botanical gardens, and he believes strongly in the importance of holistic conservation management, including research in the field, as well as safeguarding the future of cacti and succulents by cultivating them. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our speaker.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So yeah, thanks for having me. Even though this talk is about cacti and succulents, hopefully some of the ideas will translate towards other plant groups, cycads, orchids, carnivorous plants, and so on. Everything I'll be discussing today simply represents my own opinion, so not representative of the organizations I'm a part of. So I usually give talks to horticultural audiences, cactus societies a lot of the time. But all these same principles that I talk about with them can also be applied to botanical gardens as being crucial stakeholders in the conservation process. This was a last-minute addition here to my slides this morning. I'm not sure if the preference is to not do anything interactive, but if anyone recognizes what this might be on the right-hand side, please go ahead and put it in the chat. So these are rhino horns on the right-hand side, apparently. And so this is a new case that was just advertised this morning. I wouldn't have known. But yeah, these are rhino horns, and they were confiscated at the same time as the Sconophytums on the left-hand side, which is a very species-rich genus from South Africa that has now ended up on the CITES Appendix 3 because of the issues with the illegal trade. This is an interesting intersection of illegal animal trade as well as illegal plant trade that I'd never seen before. And it does show that once these issues of animal trade come into play as well, that there's clearly criminal networks at play. So hopefully I don't have to see this type of case again. But let me just contextualize the issues with cacti and succulents here a bit. So in terms of conservation in the 21st century, the extinction rate is about 1,000 times higher than the background rate pre-humans, with estimates that 1 in 6 species are committed to extinction due to climate change. And due to climate change, as well as various other factors, estimates for the future are that the extinction rate may end up 10,000 times higher than the background rate. So the work that people do at botanical gardens is absolutely crucial, given this conservation reality, because this means that there's a lot of species out there that need conservation intervention, and the funding is unfortunately insufficient. One advantage of working with plants is that the ethical issues that we face with animal conservation are not quite the same as the ones for plant conservation. So ex situ conservation for plants might be quite a bit easier than animals and require less money per taxon. So that's one good piece of news, at least. So cacti are a very charismatic plant family of about 1,855 species. It's very tough to place a number on this. Taxonomically, this is certainly a plant group that's very much so in flux. When I started using IrisBG, I ended up asking for a custom taxonomy import because of the platform that I like to work with. So I deviate a bit from Plants of the World Online, for example. There's still new species being discovered. This is a really recent species from Brazil, Ubumani anuda, from an area where there's been quite a bit of exploration already, and a few relatives of this genus are known. They're all CITES 1 plants. So yeah, this happens several times a year that you see these new species. So other than one pesky species that I don't like to talk about in Africa, all cacti are native to the Americas, so broadly distributed from southern Canada to southern Argentina. And to show this, here's a plot of temperature and precipitation where all these black dots are cactus observations that I work with for my research. And so all these colorful polygons are Whitaker biomes, and the only one without any cactus observations is the tundra. So maybe one day we'll find a little cactus that just crosses over into that boundary. But yeah, so the highest concentration is, of course, in more desert-like regions, which is what people typically think about for cacti. But there are certainly cacti even in tropical rainforest. There's even a species that is dispersed by seasonal flooding in the Amazon. So a very diverse group. In terms of diversity, here is a diversity map based on IUCN distribution maps. And so the areas with the highest diversity are, without a doubt, Mexico, parts of Brazil, and then there's also quite a few species along the Andes. The Atacama Desert has a bunch of species as well. So, of course, with that tremendous variation in environmental tolerances, we see a wide variety of growth forms as well. There's a significant chunk of species in Cactaceae that are epiphytes, so growing on top of other plants. There's prickly pears, large columnar cacti, little globose plants, and so on. Unfortunately, cacti are also really highly threatened. They're more threatened than mammals and birds, according to the IUCN. As of almost 10 years ago, 31% of species were considered threatened by the Red List, and a large fraction of species are located outside of protected areas, so that's not good either. In terms of the threats that cacti face, here is a histogram, and the most frequent threat is habitat destruction and extraction. So you see here agriculture and aquaculture at the top. The aquaculture is not a mistake. There's a species in Baja that's threatened by shrimp farming. Biological resource use includes activities such as cultural ones, but also pure commercial extraction as well, which is what we'll be talking about quite a bit today. Climate change is all the way at the bottom here, according to this histogram. In terms of my academic research, that's what I focus on, the impacts of climate change on cacti. So I do want to go through some of those results as well here real quick. So previous work that we published a couple years ago found that for 408 species that we built what's called species distribution models, which take advantage of data of where the species live. So a lot of that data derives from community size efforts, such as iNaturalist. I had to put that plug in there. So 60% of 408 species projected to at least lose part of their distribution under climate change, and almost a quarter of species losing over 25% of their range. And like most of these species distribution models, these were based on average climate. And it's very, very typical because when it comes to future climate forecasting, it's a lot easier to work with averages than working with extremes. But what we're really starting to see now for pretty much any plant group is often very sudden responses to prolonged drought events. And so we are now redoing these models. These are very new results, have not been peer reviewed yet, but we have now included drought forecasts into our models, and that number goes up from 60% of species declining to approximately 90% of species declining when you take droughts into account. And so that only goes to underscore the importance of ex situ conservation and the mission of botanical gardens. And with that mission, of course, comes good record keeping, which is what IrisBG is uniquely suitable for. And so these climate change impacts, we're already observing them in the field. This is one of the two known subpopulations of Copiapoa solaris from Chile. These plants are all dead. And it seems to be the result of very prolonged drought and just certain thresholds being hit that the plants cannot tolerate. This genus is almost entirely locally dispersed by ants and other small critters. And so there is no realistic possibility of these species naturally moving to find more suitable climate in the future, unfortunately. Copiapoa is also one of the cactus genera that is most hit by the illegal trade because they are very slow growing. Some of these clumps over here are probably several hundred years old. Another very sad news story that we were faced by here recently in the US was the local extinction of Pilosoceras milspabii from the Florida Keys. There was one known population of this species left, and fairly recently, Fish and Wildlife went in and removed all remaining plants that were still alive. So that's due to sea level rise and salinization of the soil as a result as well, that these plants simply cannot handle, along with a bunch of other issues. But yeah. Then there's habitat destruction. I'm not going to cover that in too much detail here because just like for climate change, there's not much that can be done, unfortunately. This is a friend of mine in Aruba who sent me this picture of this water park. And so Aruba has quite a few cacti, surprisingly. And this is what the area used to look like before this water park was set into place. So habitat destruction certainly does a number on cacti as well. One exception to what you can do is cactus rescues. So I'm a member of the Tucson Cactus and Succulent Society, the largest cactus society in the world, about 2,000 members. And they have a rescue program. And so with the state's permission, they go in when developments come in and go dig up the plants and then properly tag them and inventory them and then sell them at cost to members. So at least some of the plants persist. Now, biological resource use. So we'll talk a bit about the illegal and also legal trade in cacti and succulents. So it's a very difficult topic to study. Simply because there are legal issues that come into play. So a lot of the trade in cacti and succulents is in some way or other illegal. So seeds are collected illegally, plants or seeds are shipped internationally without proper paperwork. And so people don't like talking about what they're doing when it's not proper, of course. So it's very difficult to get good data on this. Here was a recent publication that I was involved with on the effects of trade and poaching pressure on extinction risk for cacti in the Atacama Desert. And here we actually managed to show through statistical models that trade and poaching are the major drivers of extinction risk for this group of cacti. So we are making some headway here. So for this specific group of cacti, the result of this poaching has been that in a very small amount of time, in just about 10 years, the conservation status of many species went from not threatened, so that would be least concern down here on this radar plot, bottom left, and very much so moving towards endangered and critically endangered. And that's just in 10 years. So the situation is really dire. So here's some shocking shots of the illegal trade. These are all Ariocarpus cuchubianus from San Luis Potosí that were intercepted coming into the United States. I don't know exactly how many plants there are here, but these were confiscated at an airport and then were sent to Desert Botanical Garden where the plants still are. Unfortunately, recently, one of the plants that had been poached and confiscated and then ended up at the Desert Botanical Garden was stolen from Desert Botanical Garden. So it's almost like it was poached twice. It's a very sad situation because these plants, this species, is readily available in cultivation as well. So there's really no need to be poaching these from habitat, period. Here are some random shots from advertisements on the internet of just the past few weeks. There are many more. I have removed identifying information. On the left-hand side are copiapoa from the Atacama Desert. And if you look carefully on the plant on the right-hand side, you see some yellow near the base. And that yellow is actually the lichen that grows naturally on the plants in the Atacama Desert. So it's very difficult to recognize field-collected plants, and we'll get into that. But there's some giveaways for certain genera, like lichens still being on the plant. Then these plants are absolutely weathered by natural conditions, and that's something you don't get in cultivation either. Here on the right-hand side are a bunch of different cactus species that are native to California that all ended up on Facebook recently with a seller from Thailand. And they specifically list out in their post that this is quote-unquote wildwood, which is their term for wild collected plants. And in the middle here are just some advertisements from Etsy. And just looking at these plants here, on the left-hand side, we have euphorbia. And you can see the price points, quite shocking. A euphorbia that is fairly new to cultivation, and these are now coming in mass from Africa, unfortunately. On the bottom left, we have a Pachypodium from Madagascar, and both of those are certainly field collected. Top right is a cactus from Mexico that I'm not certain if this specific plant was field collected or not, but it certainly looks like it to me. So I'd like to emphasize that for pretty much all of these plants, it would be impossible pretty much impossible to get a permit unless you are a botanical garden or a scientific institution to export those plants from the country of origin. It simply does not happen. So it can be very difficult to tell whether plants are field collected or not, but certain things stand out, like size, this natural weathered look, prices of plants, etc. If you'd like to know a little bit more about why people deal with wild collected cacti and succulents, I would recommend this book. It's called The Cactus Hunters. This is by Jared Margulis, who's at University of Alabama. He's also a member of the IUCN Cactus and Succulent Plant Specialist Group. And he really goes into the psychology of why people deal with these plants. And so there are certainly motives associated with this that tend more towards conservation. So some people believe that they have a duty to bring new species into cultivation because, quote unquote, they'll be ripped out of the ground anyways for development or die due to climate change. In other cases, it's simply a collector mentality, wanting something wild in a greenhouse to feel more connected to nature in a sense, I suppose, or simply commercial profits. Here's a map that was actually made by Huntington, and I think the person is actually on the call that made the map. The raw data was just based on what we've been seeing for the illegal trade in Pachypodium, Euphorbia, and Operculicaria, which are succulents, in this case from Madagascar. And so these show the trade routes. So sometimes plants are shipped directly from the country of origin to the end markets, which in this case includes the United States, includes Europe, includes parts of Asia, or they are shipped to intermediate countries, which you can see here as well, going to mainland Africa, and then are being reshipped that way. So that happens quite a bit. So a lot of countries with tighter regulations on exporting native flora, the plants are shipped via various routes to countries that have fewer regulations, or where a bribe might be easier to pass, and are then shipped to their end country. And so there's a very significant history associated with this field collected mentality. This is an excerpt here, this text from the Cactus and Succulent Society of America, one of their journals back in the 1960s. And if you read this here, the quick summary is that they were inviting members to don their Western clothes and grab a shovel to go collecting in an area north of Tucson. And so at that time, it was just completely seen as normal and something you do if you love the plants. So here's some more posts of Adenia here, shipping from the United States for $90 each. These are very large field collected plants that somehow ended up in the US and are being reshipped. And on the bottom left is a large quantity of the genus Avonia in Africa somewhere, and these are just freely being posted on social media. And there's even specific websites that focus on selling field collected plants. All of these plants, except for maybe the Sarcocaulon, are field collected and are being openly sold on the internet. So what does this mean in terms of conservation? Unfortunately, especially within plant conservation, there's been this long history of separate in situ and ex situ conservation action. And that's really becoming more and more problematic, especially as threats like climate change and massive habitat destruction come into play. So even though there's a common goal of a viable in situ population, ex situ and in situ activities are often done in isolation, and ex situ conservation is often deemed less important than in situ action. My scientific opinion, based on the climate change modeling that I do, is that ex situ conservation is our best option for a lot of these plants, unfortunately. So this talk is pretty timely because of the BGCI illegal plant campaign that's ongoing. And they have their technical review that just came out that emphasizes the importance of botanic gardens in tackling the illegal plant trade. And so the actions that they recommend, the different themes in this technical review, focus around propagation and maintaining collections, visitors and education, research and technology, engagement with law enforcement, and then collaboration and networks. And so most of the actions that I'll be proposing here really fit into one of those categories as well. So first of all, a little plug for BGCI Plant Search. And so as IrisBG users should know, through IrisBG, you have the option to create a report that you can then upload to Plant Search to keep your information on that platform up to date. And so that information is actually quite helpful for conservation assessments. Every time that I've been involved in doing a conservation assessment for the IUCN Red List, one of the things that we check is BGCI Plant Search to see if those plants, if a specific species is being propagated as part of an ex situ collection. So I would certainly recommend that you keep doing that or start doing that if you haven't yet. The information is absolutely invaluable. Also, a lot of the members of the IUCN Reassessment Task Force, so to update the status on the IUCN Red List, come from botanical gardens. So botanical gardens do really play a crucial role directly and indirectly in the conservation process, even where you're not quite aware of it. Also within IrisBG, you have this very helpful web search option here for the IUCN Red List. So depending on your taxonomy, this might be a little difficult and sometimes you might not find something. But at least for cacti, most of the species have been assessed in terms of their conservation status. So you can go here under web search and click on the IUCN Red List. And if you go to a specific taxa under IrisBG, it does have a field to enter the IUCN Red List status. Maybe something to look at in the future would be to automate this so that this field is already populated. If that's the case, then that would be a very useful attribute for gardens to work with in order to summarize the conservation status of their collections. And that might help with attracting additional funding or prioritizing propagation resources and so on. Also, potentially in the future, this is something that we're working towards in terms of research. The University of Arizona, we have this large biodiversity database called BN. And as part of this database, we also produce climate change impact models. So we hope to potentially set up this platform in such a way that you can actually link specific species with what the climate change forecasts are for the future. And so this might be another way that you can prioritize certain species in your collection by looking at how affected they might end up being by climate change. So there's a lot of possibilities for closer integration of conservation status in IrisBG. Another aspect is the idea of meta collections. And so just like with stud books for animals, we are going more in a direction of a meta collection idea for plants as well. And so the advantages of meta collections are that they typically better represent genetic diversity for species. And here's an example paper that clearly demonstrates that genetic diversity is better conserved when resources, so plant material, are pooled into meta collections. And that can certainly happen through platforms such as BGCI Plant Search. However, I do believe that there might be a better way to integrate this within IrisBG as well. Perhaps collections could be flagged as public or private, and different IrisBG members could be able to consult other gardens' collections in this way. So to collaborate more directly rather than going through plant search, where not everyone might participate, and you might not have the metadata fields that you're looking for in order to make decisions. Ex situ conservation is not stuffing plants into a botanical garden and calling it a day. I work for a botanical garden, but I also operate within horticulture. And a lot of the issues that we see with the illegal plant trade are simply a result of people wanting something they can't have. And when new species are discovered, like that Ubelmania nuda I showed earlier, when that was posted on social media, people immediately started talking about wanting that plant. And I'm almost certain that within the next couple of years, these plants will start popping up on marketplaces. And so it would be better if we could get ahead of the curve and introduce these species into cultivation in a legal manner. Too often, botanical gardens act as museums where plants go in, but they don't go out except to other botanical gardens or to research institutions. I would really encourage gardens to focus on propagation programs as a funding source, but also to deter the illegal plant trade. Here's Ripsalis triangularis pictured. It's a critically endangered species. And you don't have to read all of this, but this plant was discovered and went into a couple institutions in Germany and was completely destroyed during World War II. And for a long time, we thought it was extinct. It was recently rediscovered, but this is one example where this story could have gone very differently if it had not been rediscovered. So if this plant had been propagated and distributed across botanical gardens early for the general public, more material would have been available. So we want to avoid situations like that happening again in the future. One example of a program that really does this, deals with this issue well, is the International Succulent Introductions Program through the Huntington Botanical Gardens. And so what they do is every year they propagate a bunch of species, and I don't know the procedure for selecting the different species and so on. and offer them to the general public, typically through the Cactus and Succulent Society of America, their journal, and they advertise it there. And then these plants become available. So in many cases, I've seen new species become available in the American horticultural trade in this way. And so if you integrate conservation status into your collections policies, that can not only increase conservation value, but then you can also propagate these plants for public consumption, which reduces poaching pressure and provide additional funding for your mission. So something I definitely recommend. Here's some educational material. So this is a poster by the Ethical Cactus Collective. They have a website as well. And so this is really aimed at the consumer market for education about how to build an ethical collection. And there's these general posters, but there's also posters focusing on specific taxa, how to identify a field collected plant versus a greenhouse grown plant, which can be very difficult to do. And I would encourage staff at botanical gardens to also take a look at those materials. And one thing I have seen myself before is that certain gardens, the expertise simply doesn't exist, or the awareness simply doesn't exist of what the sourcing of specific plants are. And in some cases, that certainly leads to botanical gardens doing business with and buying plants from nurseries, where those plants ultimately derived from the wild, and at some link across the trade chain, there was falsification of paperwork or simply an absence thereof. So you don't want to end up as a botanical garden with illegally collected plants, of course. So definitely do your research on that, I would say. So this advice certainly applies to not just the consumer market, but also to the to botanical gardens as well. Here's another poster from the South African National Biodiversity Institute. South Africa is currently, and has for the last few years, been dealing with tremendous pressure on natural populations of succulents. Poachers often work with separate scouting teams and then poaching teams because it is so lucrative. In some cases, new species have been discovered and even described by supposed poachers, and a few species have gone functionally extinct in the last few years due to this activity in South Africa. And it doesn't really look like things are abating very much. In some cases, it seems like legal intervention through CITES is working. In other cases, it just simply seems like we're running out of plants to poach in the wild. And so there's a switch in species, or the market becomes so saturated that there's no more profit to be made. I do want to emphasize that not all trade in field collected plants is illegal. But for cacti and succulents, in the majority of cases, it is, in my opinion, unethical and certainly untenable from a conservation perspective. These are active listings of two species of Echinocactus, U.S. natives, on Etsy right now. And especially for the right-hand side here, these Echinocactus horizontaloneus are likely legally collected from ranches in Texas. And so there's nothing legally wrong with doing this, but these quantities are absolutely enormous. And so that's where education really comes into play here in stopping this behavior. By continuing to buy plants of this kind, even if it's legal, we encourage the ranchers who allow the digging of these plants on their land to keep doing this as an extra income stream. Another way of doing education is through educational displays at your botanical gardens. And here's another example from the Huntington, where there's been a sign up for a specific plant that I have no idea what plant it is, that was stolen. And so they are using this as an opportunity to draw attention to the issue of illegal trade as well. So certainly something I can recommend as well. Also, if there were easier direct access to conservation status in IrisBG, you could make conservation status part of your standard label. And this is often something you see at zoos where conservation status is listed. Maybe something to consider to do for your plant collections as well. Another aspect of where botanical gardens can make a big difference is by interacting with the horticultural community. So after some controversial problems within the American horticultural community, the Cactus and Succulent Society of America issued a new conservation policy statement where they no longer allow any participants involved with the legal or illegal trade in field collected plants. So they simply don't want anything to do with it. And local societies have also followed suit. Here's a couple extracts from different cactus societies where they no longer allow this behavior. And this is all very recent, within the past year and a half. And so at least in one of these cases, this increased policy, these tighter policies have come about as a result of tighter collaborations between botanical garden and a cactus and succulent society. So in a lot of for a lot of cactus and succulent societies around the US at least, I'm not sure internationally, they tend to hold their events at botanical gardens. So when that is the case, a botanical garden is able to leverage that tight connection to encourage these societies to implement and enforce these tighter conservation policies, which is a good way that we can indirectly have a impact as well on the issue of the illegal trade. If you do not have a Cactus and Succulent Society hosting events at your botanical garden, look and see if there is one in your area. I saw at least one participant today where I know there is a Cactus and Succulent Society in their town that has monthly meetings and sales and so on, and they don't host it at the botanical garden. So it seems like kind of a missed opportunity for both parties. These are some of the things that I recommend for the horticultural community when I talk about conservation. And the same things do apply for botanical gardens as well. So when you're acquiring plants, ask questions about provenance, even if you're buying locally. Don't feel guilty. If I own a nursery and if someone were to ask me, okay, did you grow this or did this come from the wild? I would be very excited to tell you all about how I grew this from seed and show you all the data and so on. There's also a tendency to give people who have been part of the horticultural community for a long time a pass and just assume that they're not involved in any sort of improper behavior. This can include very long established nurseries or very prominent speakers, and that is not a good idea. There's at least one ongoing case that I'm aware of right now in South Africa where a prominent botanical garden staff member is actually under legal scrutiny because of potential involvement with the illegal plant trade. Education of others is also very important, not shaming people. A lot of people, including staff at botanical gardens, simply do not know how to recognize these plants or don't even think about the possibility that plants that they might be sourcing are field collected. Not idolizing field collected plants, emphasizing growing from seed. And then, as I mentioned, you could exert some influence on clubs, horticultural societies that host events at botanical gardens to strengthen their conservation policies. And if there are continued infractions, then you could even sever those ties. So now a bit more on the plant side. Here's some work I've done with the Tucson Cactus and Succulent, Tucson Botanical Gardens. Here's a variety of different prickly pears that were put into the ground there that came from my nursery. They all came with conservation status information and so on. So this was when it was just planted. I haven't seen it in a little bit. So I do strongly recommend trying to establish closer ties with local nurseries as well, instead of just getting plants from international expeditions. These here are two species of Pilosoceras that are both critically endangered from Brazil. And so these are part of a conservation project that I've been involved in, where these plants, seeds of these plants are legally collected and then exported from, in this case, Brazil. Some of the seed goes into a seed bank at a botanical garden in the US. The plants are grown by different nurseries, and the first few plants of every accession go back to the botanical garden and sometimes other botanical gardens as well. So that satisfies their needs for their collections. And then the nurseries keep some stock plants as well and keep propagating those to make the plants available to the general public as well. And so these two specific species are completely new to cultivation. And this is certainly a success story on that front. There's some other different Pilosocereus plants from that same project. So this has been ongoing for several years now, and there's been several rounds of new introductions of species into cultivation because of this. I really like growing from seed, and so I just started working with IrisBG a bit over a year ago, and it has really changed my life. It certainly took some work to get everything set up. The initial data import is always a little rough, but after that transition has been made, things have become a lot easier here in this way. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I would like to show a couple pictures and then one thing that I've done to make my life easier as a nursery using IrisBG. Here's a Disco Cactus subterraneo proliferans, so some young seedlings. This species is likely extinct in the wild. Efforts have not paid off in terms of trying to find it again. So it does survive in cultivation, however. It is not found in any botanical gardens according to BGCI Plant Search, and it has been around in the horticultural community for a while. So in this case, hopefully I'll be able to pass some of these plants along to different botanical gardens. So adapting IrisBG to use for a nursery has proved to be a challenge initially. So one thing that I really need is, since my stock changes very frequently, I need to keep things updated, and I need to be able to consult my stock amount when I have customers in my nursery. So maybe some of these things that I mentioned here might help with some ideas for other people. But I have things set up so that every hour there's a stock report produced via the reports module and then the task scheduler module. Then that report goes straight onto Dropbox, which is automatically synced with my phone. So I don't have to lug a laptop around in the greenhouse, and I can consult on there. So for my item numbering scheme, I came up with a combination where item numbers indicate both clonal information, important for conservation, as well as information about container sizing, which does influence my pricing for plants, and also influences where the plant can be found in my greenhouses. So I have the first 2 digits of every item number indicating container information, including landscape plants, seedling pots, different pot sizes, and so on. And then the last 2 digits indicate clonal information. So whether or not the clonality is tracked for an accession, then the clonal number, or indicating that a clonal number is actually unknown. So a propagule that has just fallen off and I don't know what parent plant it belongs to. Sometimes I have to update stock in very large numbers at the same time. For example, when I'm going through and throwing out ungerminated material. And that's where I've started combining custom computer code with different templates. So in this case, what happens is I first go through and enter all the codes of different plant labels or different accessions that have not germinated with their specific seedling pot accession number attached to it. And I don't necessarily know how many items I have of that accession. So I just entered this change code. Then I wrote a computer script in the R programming language that goes through and retrieves the current stock value for every item, and then does a little bit of math to figure out what the new quantity should be in my database. It spits out a new properly formatted template for the data import module in IrisBG, and then I simply have to go back into IrisBG and import it. And so this has allowed me to really speed up stock updating. So I can keep one of these sheets on the top left on my phone throughout the day, just simply add changes in there. And at the end of the day, all I have to do is run this script and upload the changes into IrisBG. So I'm pretty much done here, but I would like to mention the issue of illegal trade having an influence on the mission of botanical gardens as well, negatively influencing it. As a result of illegal trade in plants, we are dealing with stronger and stronger restrictions on what we can trade, even between botanical gardens. I've heard from several institutions that they've simply stopped doing any sort of international trade simply because they cannot or don't want to deal with the paperwork. It's become so time intensive, so costly that it's simply no longer viable. And that is an issue that the horticultural community also experiences. So international trade has become really, really difficult. And, the motivation for that is a reasonable one, the illegal trade, but it typically deters proper horticultural activity as well. So we deal with some of the same issues, and so maybe we can come up with some solutions together. And that's it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mich. Thanks, everyone, for coming. And thanks again, Mich, for presenting today. This is a great topic. Thank you.